So who ran interference for Kinnear? And the rapist at City Hall who likes to hit on women, homeless women. And then all the police and DHS and everybody gets us no trespass from parks. Anybody who makes allegations. Autumn, Caton, military, her military father. Becky Burrell, who said her relatives were military, texting me when I said, oh, he says he's police. No, he's not. He's just a moron. So basically, and then what were they doing? They were impersonating victims advocates from Sarah George's office and dropping Bernie Sanders' name, mentioning Judge Hoare, but in such a way to distance themselves from him. Yeah, Judge Hoare, who threatened me and didn't make proper referrals during that restraining order, referred me over to McAfee at BPD, who he knew was going to cover his ass and the lawyer's ass. So anybody who was using Kinnear was also using Becky Burrell and Autumn Caton. You were working with DHS. You're a fucking Mossad asset, as far as I'm concerned. So all these people impersonating cops, none of them's in jail. Something stinks. Something really stinks here. So not only are you in bed with your part, if you're running Kinnear and housing Kinnear and Toby and Becky Burrell and Autumn Caton and all her little friends that were impersonating victims advocates and progressive law enforcement, along with Ranger Preston. And admitted to there being a bioweapon being unleashed in that park. But who else were they covering for? The sex trafficking that the police are allowing to happen with that City Hall guy. And apparently he wasn't the only one hitting on homeless women. Several private security were doing it too. Like the guy who was working at Miller Center yesterday morning with the glasses and who was always on the bus, said he worked security at the beach. Who Michael said, that's my friend. Like, that means shit to me. So, yeah, my brain's connecting all the dots and it ain't looking good. Especially since you're still running. I mean, Becky Burrell was on the bus with me yesterday. That wasn't a fucking coincidence. You're still running these fucking snitches. It's not like that stopped. It's not like the little gang that was impersonating progressive law enforcement has stopped their illegal surveillance. It's not like I ever got an apology from BPD or a judge for there being a restraining order out on me that everybody knows damn well is false. Burlington Housing Trust is just as guilty of that shit as everybody else. The lawyers and the judges and the police, DHS, Weinberger. And anybody who works for her at Miller Center can't trust you either. I don't know what to tell y'all at Sarah George's office. I really don't. But I'm going to make sure all these people are implicated. So if anything happens to me, they're going to think twice about letting anything happen to me. Because my father can absolutely subpoena every fucking one of them. Or his lawyers can. And Chad probably wants Dad dead because, number one, Chad lied to him, but also because that pelvic floor diagnosis started with Chad's father's hospital that I'm aware of. Didn't start at Mizzou. It started in Orlando. And it also started with Darla Munoz and Chad's former co-workers, Kim Mann and Karen Bankowitz, and that Navy officer, Glenn Harris, who was Beasley's sex offender probation officer, who knew he wasn't doing his job right. That Beasley got new victims while he was on a GPS monitor and an ankle bracelet and house arrest. And he was turning in his logs. Every time Beasley got in his car to leave, he had to write down his mileage, write down his destination, write down his mileage again. Then when he left his destination, he had to write down his mileage. And then if his destination was home or the grocery store, he had to write down his mileage every time he got in the car and out of the car. And then in the car, he had to start all over again. And guess what his destination was many a time? Scott Mason's house, where he had a girlfriend living with him that had a 12-year-old daughter. And internet access. And that's where they were filing their false IRS income tax return claims in the names of inmates. So we had internet access, which was a violation of the Lunsford Act, Jessica's law, and access to a kid. And Scott Mason, and I think another kid, based on the letters I read, they were talking about how they needed some young kid who was good with computers to set up a donation button on the fake web Project Innocence website that they cooked up. And I was thinking that might be Nessel because his age matched. And then Chad later told me after Mason shot Nessel and killed him that it was some argument over the computer because they were always trying to force us to do something on the computer. And that's why Beasley and I were always getting into it. He was trying to force me to get my computers fixed so he could use them. And he wasn't a civilian, he was Navy. He was dishonorably discharged for beating the hell out of his commanding officer. And he had another roommate living there named Fred, who was a Navy veteran, who was seen at the Pensacola Navy Hospital regularly. And he asked me, he said, please move in. This guy's out of control. I need help. I can't. He's always threatening me, made me go buy a computer. He said that Beasley took him to some thrift store and bought an old computer, gave Fred the money so that technically Fred bought it, but it wasn't purchased with Fred's money. Beasley gave the money to Fred and had Fred go through the motions. And Fred was he was dealing with a lot of stuff, so he really, even as a Navy veteran, he wasn't a badass. He didn't do well standing up for himself. I think he was, that's why. He wasn't regular, like, he was Navy, but he was a propulsions engineer. So he mostly did like engineering stuff. He wasn't in the battlefield. He probably went through boot camp, but he didn't go through any type of, he was never trained to go into a battlefield anywhere. They had him working on propulsion systems on the ship, Navy ships. He was doing engineering crap. He was not out doing fighting stuff. I couldn't figure out, why does he need my help? I'm fucking female. And he's the Navy bit. And then I realized that he ended up getting a job over in, I don't think it was Pensacola. It was somewhere on the other side of Pensacola where there was a lot of shipyards building ships. And anyway, what was real stupid about that situation was Homeland Security agent Chris Wilkinson, who worked for Pensacola PD. I told him that was Beasley's computer. He just made Fred go through the motion of buying it so that he could have plausible deniability to call it Fred's computer, even though Fred never touched it. And they still couldn't take possession of that computer, even though it was evidence that Beasley had been on the computer many times and probably had child porn on it. And he kept trying to tell me to go find Fred. So Faye and I had to drive all the way out of town, never could find the guy. So I could get permission are you kidding me? If you think there's porn on that shit, you fucking take the shit. Are you kidding me? This is the shit that doesn't make any sense about that whole case. And then and they were real suspicious of Mr. Harris in the first place. Because Mr. Harris said, call me when they get there and I'll come over. And when they got there, I got on the phone and they tried to get me not to call Mr. Harris. And then Mr. Harris got there and lied to them. He sat there for a little bit. He wasn't there for the whole interview, or maybe he was. But anyway, DHS asked Chris Wilkinson asked Harris why he arrested Beasley, and he lied and said he got an anonymous call. He knew damn well he didn't get a fucking anonymous call. And I even say on the witness stand it wasn't an anonymous call, it was me. And he knew that. He gave me his fucking number. So there was a whole lot going on. And Kim Mann and Karen Banklitz covered all that up. Chris Wilkinson wanted new charges for him in Pensacola. Now we know why Pensacola prosecutor never filed charges, because then the victims could sue the state of Florida. It would be evidence that the Orlando state's attorneys who let Beasley walk on 30 years probation, even though they filed all those motions for a reoffender releasee. He reoffended within 3 years of being released from prison, habitual offender, and a whole bunch of other crap. I got them all on my Google. And I got access to them because because the Orange County clerk was able to vet me as Chad's investigator because of my text between Chad and I showed him my phone. And it was a little flip phone. It wasn't a smartphone. But it still had the contact, and it still showed Chad and then his text. Call me after you get them. Or I'm driving around the courthouse. Text me or call me when you're done, and I'll make sure I spin around and pick you up. And it said Chad Cronin, and Chad had been a domestic violence prosecutor there, so the clerk knew who he was. So, yeah, it doesn't matter how many fucking trolls you hire to stalk me and make up whatever lies, whether it's Autumn or whatever. There's too many other loose ends that you're not going to be able to tie up that proves you're a goddamn liar. Chad, Virginia, Darla, whoever. So, yeah, I don't know if that lady that told me to go to Feeding Chittenden is one of Burlington Housing Trust employees or shills, or I don't know. I don't know if it's a setup or what.